So after over 20 years behind bars, after multiple attempts to fast-track himself to the gates of hell, and after multiple prison attacks, Ian Huntley is now dead. And first and foremost, I believe that the news of this monster's death should follow us giving our thoughts and condolences to the beautiful girls whose lives he decided to end. Holly Wells was a girl's girl. She loved her friends and they loved her, as did her family, who were incredibly proud and supportive of their beautiful daughter. Her energy was said to be infectious and it showed in her love of singing, dancing and entertainment. Holly loved makeup, technology and maybe most importantly, Manchester United, whose kit she would proudly wear. As did her best friend Jessica Chapman, who she met when she was just 4 years old, and for the best part of 6 years in between, these two were inseparable. Jessica was confident, loving and kind, and that confidence would shine through during her interactions with adults, teachers and others, where it was noted that she would be a lot more inquisitive and ask a lot more questions than her peers. A teacher of Jessica described her as having a cheeky charm. She liked swimming, wrestling and loved football. David Beckham was Jessica's hero. She actually played for the Solomon Town Rangers under-11s team and was generally very sporty. Holly and Jessica left behind 3 siblings and grieving parents who my heart breaks for. They showed strength, resilience and selflessness over the years, helping to campaign and even helping the police develop a database targeted at stopping predators getting into roles of power. And if you want to know the ins and outs of the Soham murders, then I would suggest you watch our original video that's on screen now, where we covered the case, including how Ian Huntley went about his crimes, how he planned on getting away with them, and just how this monster was caught. But today, we're going to dive into Ian Huntley's time in prison, a biological child emerging and finding out who her father was, the multiple prison attacks, and the consequences that his murder has for every single predator inside UK jails right now. But before we get into all of that, Josh, we did kind of call this one a couple of months back on the channel. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember. I think we did a short on this at the time, and you were telling me that more and more SOs, I think we have to call them for this video, are getting put in like general population, and there's more and more attacks going on as a result of that, because as we know, there's a hierarchy in the prison system. And the SOs are targeted straight away for any of these violence. Like basically, if you're a murderer or a rapist or anything like that, you are going straight for the SOs.
Yeah, and this is the problem. There's become somewhat of a culture in prison where I'm assuming a lot of these offenders believe that if they off a high-profile SO, it kind of makes them somewhat of a hero. It makes their crimes all right. And we'll definitely speak about that, because one man that I do want to get into in this video is the man that's been accused of murdering Ian Huntley, and that is a man named Anthony Russell. Over the last week or so, a few more reports of exactly why Anthony Russell is inside HMP Wakefield right now have emerged, and I'm going to get into that exact story itself. But before we speak about this specific murder, and before we even potentially look at any of the facts around what we're claiming right now, what is it that's made us believe that? Well, I'm going to give you a few cases from just the past few years that have made me distinguish that there's a pattern emerging here.
Right, you're discerning true crime fans, and as a result, you know how to keep yourself safe online. And we have got something right now that could help you do just that. Because there are people out there right now called data brokers that are stealing your data and getting access to things like your full name, your email address, even your parents' name, or even your political affiliation. These people know so much about you, and it's completely wrong that they do. And the scariest part about this is that people are buying and selling that data and using it against you, and anyone can access it. Employers, strangers, and even scammers have access to that data. And criminals actually use this data for things like identity theft, for stalking, harassment, and even fraud. And these schemes are getting more and more serious. And you know, if you've ever tried to get rid of your information online manually, it takes an incredible amount of time. And in fact, it's often impossible. And that is why we use Incogni. What Incogni does is it works on your behalf without you having to be involved at all, to wipe all of that data that you want off the internet straight away. And for less than the price of a cup of coffee every single month, you can get Incogni working on your behalf. All you have to do is hit the link in the description below. And if you use code Joey and Josh, it will give you 60% off the usual price. So how does it work? Incogni reach out to the data broker stealing your data, and on your behalf, they request that your information is deleted from their databases. And they keep doing it, so your data is removed. But here's where it gets even more powerful. Sometimes your information ends up on random websites. You find it and you want to get rid of it. So now what you can do is a thing called custom removals. You can put a direct website into Incogni and it will help you get your information off of that specific website. So getting started is super easy. As we say, hit the link in the description, create an Incogni account and tell them whose data you want removed. Then just grant them permission to work on your behalf and then sit back and relax. Incogni will do all of the work for you. And by the way, Incogni is totally risk-free for 30 days. If you try it and it's not for you, you will get a full refund. So take back control of your personal data today. Hit the link in the description below and remember to use that code Joey and Josh for 60% off when you purchase an annual plan. Thank you so much to Incogni for supporting this video, and thank you to all of you that support them. It means the absolute world and allows us to continue making these videos. Now let's get back into it.
Kyle Bevin was the disgusting human being who ended the life of a 2-year-old girl. He was sent to HMP Wakefield and the inmates killed him. And when they did, we covered the story, and that's exactly when we said that the likes of Ian Huntley must be absolutely shitting himself. And that death followed another one just a month prior, when the Lost Prophets lead singer Ian Watkins was also tortured and killed inside HMP Wakefield. Do you remember the viral video within the last couple of years that was taken from the CCTV of a prison, and it shows 2 inmates inside there? They go in laughing to another man's cell. You don't see what happens in the cell. They come out, and on the video it tells us that they just killed the man in the cell. It went completely viral.
Yeah, do you know what? I remember seeing that, like I think it was on TikTok or something, and but I don't know the details of actually what happened in the case. Do you know what actually happened and who this was?
Yeah, that was an inmate that was serving his time at HMP Foss Way. He was being bullied, and eventually 2 other inmates went into his cell and murdered him while another inmate kept lookout. What were their reasons for murdering that inmate, Josh?
No idea.
Check his sentence, what he was inside for. He was a sex offender. And then obviously we have Ian Huntley, which will be no surprise to anyone, was being targeted. Now, regardless of my thoughts on them, right? What I'm not trying to do here is trying to justify anything. I'm trying to show you that I believe there's a clear pattern of emerging. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do too. And really it all goes back to the prison system in general, doesn't it? Because I expect these SOs to be segregated because they're very vulnerable people. And the fact is that there's a record now of people in prison going after them, but segregated doesn't necessarily mean what we think it means, does it? Like when I think of segregation in these cases, I would expect these guys to be isolated, not necessarily sort of like completely isolated where they're not seeing anyone else, but definitely sort of away from the general population. But being segregated in prison doesn't mean that at all, does it?
Well, no, it doesn't. And what comes into this is the fact that our prisons, much like our NHS system and our hospitals, are completely overpopulated. There's no more prison staff working now. Prisons haven't extended and got bigger, and there hasn't been massive renovations than there was 20 years ago, but there are now 4 times the amount of SOs in prison now as there was 20 years ago. So as much as one small silver lining that people might perceive has come out of this is the fact that a few nonces have been offed, if you're celebrating the state of our prisons right now, you'd be very wrong to, in my opinion.
And I tell you what, it's not just the threats from other inmates and segregation being an issue here, it's also monitoring in prisons. Like basically, if they aren't being watched over 24/7, there's a real threat of self-deletion in the prison world, because basically these guys know exactly what they've done. They have incredibly troubled mental states, and so they do need to be watched, because if they aren't, self-deletion happens more regularly than you would think.
Yeah, and it's saying that Ian Huntley definitely was no stranger to. So Ian Huntley's time in prison nearly ended before it actually even started. He was sent to HMP Woodhill, and at the time, there were small hopes that one of the UK's most notorious inmates in Charles Bronson might be able to get to him. He was rumoured to be in Woodhill at the time, and he had a history of going after child attackers. Instead, It was Ian that brought the first real bit of harm to himself. When he tried to top himself, he had actually been storing the medication that he had been given in the sides of his mouth. And when he would go back to his cell, he would take out the medication, he would put it into a box of PG tips, and he stored enough of them until he believed he had enough for a lethal dosage. And that meant on June the 9th, 2003, Huntley tried to opt for the easy way out. Just weeks before his trial for the murders of Holly and Jessica, he swallowed 29 antidepressants pills in his cell and was found compulsing and foaming at the mouth. He was rushed to Milton Keynes Hospital, and the early reports were that he might not make it. But fortunately, he did make a full recovery, and within 48 hours was back in his cell. I say fortunately because I'm blessed with knowing what was to come, and I would not have wanted Huntley to have not been around for that. And this was actually said to be one of 3 unsuccessful attempts, all of which were said to have been through using medication rather than any physical harm.
So we know he tried to opt out quite a few times now, but did he actually make any friends or any acquaintances, or does he have any visitors?
There's people, yeah, that will widen their eyes and raise an eyebrow at you saying that. Did he make any friends? But those people should know that pretty much everyone that we've covered on this channel, Levi Belfield, the Yorkshire Ripper, Ian Brady, everyone pretty much made friends in prison. Ian Huntley, not so much. There wasn't a single report of Huntley having even one friend inside, and actually other reports stated that it was the guards that Huntley would try and cozy up to, feeling like maybe if he was able to develop a rapport with them, they would give him extra protection. And he also didn't have many visitors. His mum Lynn was apparently the most frequent, and it's said that his father actually did come to visit him just the one time, and that meant that in between the odd visit every now and again, Ian Huntley pretty much had nothing to do. He would spend more or less all of his time inside of his prison cell playing on his Xbox, something that when the public learnt that he had inside his cell was definitely controversial. But luckily, something that wasn't actually inside his cell for all that long. Because in 2019, Ian Huntley's Xbox, as well as other privileges, were stripped from him. And this was following somewhat of an altercation that he had with a prison guard. I say somewhat because it was pathetic, to be honest with you. Reports were that Ian Huntley kicked out at a prison guard who was just standing over him watching him, not actually even touching him. And when he did so, multiple people who were said to have been there reported that Ian Huntley then ran back to his cell like a child before prison officers had to drag him out crying. He got 2 weeks on solitary confinement. He had his Xbox, his DVDs, and any other entertainment from his side, his cell, taken away from him. He was told he wasn't allowed to order his favourite meal anymore of fish and chips with inside the prison, and most importantly, his job was taken off of him. A painting job from within inside the prison's workshop. And this was something that Ian Huntley was not going to let slip away easily. Ian Huntley campaigned to get that job in the workshop back, and fate would have it that eventually he did.
And obviously he didn't know at this stage just how important that workshop would be in the rest of his life. But why don't we now go on to some of the other attacks? Because while we know that the fatal attack was the last one that Huntley suffered, he also was under immense physical trauma for the entirety that he was in prison. There were actually 4 total severe attacks, but we're just going to go through the 3 main ones in this episode, mainly because it takes a bit of time to go through them. So the first attack was in 2005. He'd actually originally been sent down in 2003. I don't know if you remember that, but basically he gets down to HMP Wakefield. This prison is called Monster Mansion, and you know about it very well. We've covered it in various different episodes on the channel so far, and it's called Monster Mansion because it houses the most serious criminals, pretty much all of the criminals that we've covered on the channel.
Yeah, if someone's done something serious, the chances are, in my head, they've either been sent to Wakefield or Franklin.
Yeah, exactly. And Franklin is relevant for the second attack that we'll go through in this story. But the first attack was committed by someone who was by no means a good person. This guy was called Mark Hobson, and while we'll commend him for the crime that he committed against Huntley, I think it's important to go into a little bit of the backstory of why he was in prison, because his story is equally as concerning. So he was described as a spree killer, and that was because he first murdered his girlfriend. Her name was Claire Sanderson, and he did so by hitting her in the head over 17 times with a hammer. He then went on to wrap her body in bin bags, and he also attacked her twin sister, Diane, in what I would say is an even more gruesome fashion than 17 times over the back of the head with a hammer, because he also then went on to abuse her as well. After that, he also attacked an elderly couple. Their names were James and Joan Britton, and he also harbored a plan to attack the twins' parents that he had just murdered and assaulted, as well as an ex-girlfriend's parents as well. And so when he was attacking Huntley, he actually used a vessel of boiling hot water. He threw it all over Huntley. And the Screws then go on to do a bit of an investigation afterwards, and they found that Hobson actually had a to-do list where he detailed exactly what he wanted to do in terms of all these crimes, and he actually left it in full physical proof. He wasn't hiding anything. In fact, I think he's quite proud of what he did. And bear this in mind, after all of the crimes that I just said, he was actually sent down in April 2005 with a whole life order. This attack actually happened in September, so he wasn't even in prison for that long. And I think it's clear to say he was trying to make a statement as soon as he possibly could when he got into prison, and this was the first opportunity he could to attack Huntley, and he did just that. So as we say, Mark Hobson, very much not a good man, and I know that many of you will still not be very angry about this attack, and you are absolutely right to do so. Huntley was then left with severe scalding burns. So bad were these burns that he was actually unable to attend his own High Court hearing where he received his 40-year minimum sentence. So he wasn't even there when he actually got the sentence laid down upon him. And as you can imagine, Huntley is furious about the attack. He tried to sue the prison service. He tried to get compensation. So he said that they failed in their duty for care, and he tried to get 15 grand in compensation. He also tried to get 2,500 in legal aid for his, defence and his fees.
15 grand would go a long way in prison, inside the tuck shop and stuff like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely would. And I don't think he deserved a single penny of that. And so much so that their local MP of the constituency in which Huntley was convicted of his crimes within, his name was Jim Place. He basically said that there's no way the taxpayer will pay for this. There's no way he'll win his trial and win his compensation claim, and that he had no sympathy for him at all in any way. And I think the public sentiment very much mirrored what the MP was saying. And also a prison spokesman spoke about this incident as well, and basically said there is no way to prevent these incidents from happening. We just can't do it. So I found that quite surprising that a prison officer would come out and say that, but it shows you it's the truth. There's no way to prevent these hardened criminals from doing this.
I know a screw in a Cat B prison, right? And I've spoke to him about this sort of stuff. Obviously, I won't name no names. I'll say what prison. I spoke to him about this sort of stuff, and believe you me, yeah, the Screws don't care, mate.
The Screws don't care, and also, let's be honest, mate, the Screws have to deal with a load of other shit, like quite literally feces sometimes being thrown over them. They have to deal with assaults. They have to deal with intimidation, violence on their own part. So yeah, I think the Screws are dealing with a lot. And also, can we just say, Screws don't get paid hardly near enough what they should deserve. No. And I actually did some research around this case. There was a period of time, I think it was in the 90s actually, that prison officers were striking, but also there weren't enough prison officers. So what they did is they got bobbies on the beat into prisons, and they gave them a bit of overtime and said, if you work this job, get a bit more cash. And so a lot of police officers, I should say, volunteered and said, we want to do it. And anyway, they spent some time in prison, and then he said, this is way harder, way more dangerous, and way worse paid than a bobby on the beat.
100%, because during any interaction that you'll ever have with a police officer, if you meet a screw, believe me, they'll be completely different. And a police officer having a police officer's mentality would not serve them well in a prison. When we talk about dangers within the prison, yeah, I think that one thing that maybe people's minds don't jump to and people don't acknowledge straight away is, do you know who's probably in the most danger in any prison at any given time?
Surely a screw.
The Screws, mate. The Screws. Yeah. So they know what side also, and again, like, they know what side their bread's buttered as well. So let's say, for example, if their bread was buttered, per se, that's what we say in England, if they had, let's say, a powerful high-profile inmate that was in there, took a bit of a liking to them, probably made their life a little bit easier. The other ones know that that powerful inmate he likes that screw, and the other ones then don't give him a problem. Trust me, if that powerful inmate then goes and stabs someone, maybe you might turn a blind eye. That's all I'm saying. Just trust me on that.
Yeah, should we talk about the next attack that happened in March 2010, so 5 years after the original one? Huntley's now in H&P Frankland. So, as we said, 2 major prisons that you can go for the most serious crimes. He's now in Frankland. And again, he's in the healthcare wing. This is where the first attack happened as well, in that prison, and we're back in the healthcare wing. What you learn and realise very quickly about all of these attacks is that they often happen in the healthcare wing because there's less security, less guards around, less issues, often actually less prisoners around as well. So there's more opportunities for attacks.
Historically, on the healthcare wing, there's way more opportunity for high-profile prisoners and inmates to mix as well.
Yeah.
There's like a historical story of Myra Hindley and Rose West meeting and forming an attachment to each other. They met on a healthcare wing.
Yeah, there you go. So, going back to this one, it's Sundays, 3:25 in the afternoon. Huntley's just finished his shift as a cleaner, and he's not actually even in the healthcare wing for health reasons. He's just waiting to then go back into the main prison after his shift. And then, without warning, another inmate, this famous inmate, I would say, infamous, Damien Fowkes.
Yeah.
He finds him straight away, and he slashes him in the neck in a very sudden and unprovoked attack. Now, we say unprovoked, but I'll get onto that in a minute.
I mean, he kind of provoked the whole world, didn't he?
Exactly. But even more so, I think he provoked Fowkes as well.
I think even you would have took a swing if he had a walk past.
I think so. So, he gets slashed. He tries to run down a corridor, but Fowkes again is attacking him over and over again. He gets a few shots off.
Can I just interrupt here? For anyone that's wondering, how was Damien Fowkes able to carry out this attack? He is highly skilled in this realm, isn't he? Do you know what they call Damien Fowkes?
No, I don't know the nickname.
The nonce basher.
And why was that, Joey?
He liked bashing nonces.
Yeah, he had a record of this, and I'll go into this because after throwing some furniture and trying to escape, Fowkes continues to go on this attack. And you might be asking, who is Damien Fowkes? What was he in for? Did he have the amazing amount of crimes that Mark Hobson actually committed? Well, he didn't, but he was a career criminal, I would say.
A choice, some might say.
And why do you say that?
Because he went in for minor crimes, didn't he, and just started killing
people.
Well,
I don't know about minor crimes. He was in prison for armed robbery, and he had a significant sentence for that. It was quite a bad robbery by all accounts, and he'd actually been doing that since the early 1990s. So he'd had a significant record of crimes over a period of time, which meant that his record added up.
Okay, can I cut to the chase here?
Yep.
Has he hurt any women?
Nope.
No? Okay, he hasn't hurt any women?
Nope.
Has he nonced anyone?
Nope.
Good bloke.
Yeah, in comparison, yes.
Yes, for what he done, good bloke. Who has he actually hurt? Has he killed men? Has he hurt men?
I think it's just armed robbery, so I don't think he actually hurt anyone.
Give the fella a medal!
Yeah, don't say it.
No, don't say it.
Because when you learn a bit more about him, he does have a severe personality disorder. He has been diagnosed with psychopathic tendencies, and he does have a very vocal hatred of
nonces.
Child killers.
Wouldn't really say that is a psychopathic thing. I think most people in their right mind don't really like him.
No, but I think this guy has also been diagnosed with various ailments. So we'll just say that. He fashioned a makeshift shank. He used a piece of plastic, welded a little razor blade to it, and that was the implement they used to attack Huntley. This attack left Huntley with what they described as a massive gaping cut. It was so severe, in fact, that he was actually given 21 internal and external stitches
to his face. How many stitches do you reckon my mate had?
Go on, I don't know.
16. So
wow, and that's a big old scar.
That's a big old Mars bar across the face. Yeah.
Which I don't understand this right, because the prison authorities spoke about this afterwards. They did a press release, and they said that the injuries sustained by Huntley were not life-threatening.
Yeah, I mean, my mate got stabbed in the face, and it would be technically classed as not life-threatening.
We're talking about getting attacked in the neck.
Yeah,
I would say that was incredibly.
When you start talking measurements-wise of pints, when you're talking about how much blood you've lost, it is life-threatening.
I think so.
But what people might not know from that is that Ian Huntley in his later years was rocking a very visible scar.
Yeah. In fact, there's a famous photo of Huntley leaving prison with that scarf covering it, doesn't it? Because they had to wheel him back into the prison and he had that. That's a now infamous photo of him, I would say. In fact, when you Google search Ian Huntley, that's probably the first photo that comes up these days, isn't it? So, as you can imagine, Huntley is also now even more annoyed at the prison service than he was previously. He then tries to file another compensation claim. Obviously, the British taxpayer is giving him a big finger. Big middle finger saying fuck off. Because he tried to claim over 100 grand this time. He upped his numbers, specifically seeking various different physical assault charges and also 20 grand for his physical injuries and 60 grand in punitive damages. Basically, he alleged that authorities, again, didn't adhere to their duty of care against him. And more so than anything, because he described himself as a high-profile case. High profile, Huntley. Why don't you just fuck off? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're just a dickhead.
Yeah.
You caused one of the worst crimes in British history, and you're claiming you're a high profile thing. You deserve protection.
Ian Huntley has always, and I know it's just like easy to say it about someone like that, but he's always given me Weasel vibes. The reports of him trying to cozy up to prison guards and things like that did not take me by surprise in the slightest. Just on the small bits of media we've seen and stuff like that, Ian Huntley's the sort of fella that makes your skin crawl, and he's not got a backbone to be able to stand up to people.
He doesn't. So, he tried to claim this compensation. The Justice Secretary at the time, Jack Straw, he goes in and he basically says, I've got absolutely no intention to pay you any of that money. You've got no ability to claim those claims. And basically he just said that we're never going to give him any compensation at all.
Well, what you got to remember is, at fault of the taxman or at the discompensation or whatever of the taxman, we have already paid fucking loads more for Ian Huntley than we ever should have.
Well, let's talk about that for a second then, because this is something that a lot of people have talked about this case. Obviously, we've had Watkins. We now have Huntley. A lot of people have been saying, why do we not just have the death penalty back, get rid of these people from the moment they're convicted? And I'm very interested to know, Joey, your opinion of this, because I don't know where you lie actually on the spectrum of wanting the death penalty and not. Do you think there are crimes that warrant it?
Yeah, for cases of irrefutable guilt, I think there are cases and crimes where I would like the death penalty.
Do you think it's worse for those people that they have to live their lives in prison as opposed to ending their lives prematurely with the death penalty?
Very much depends. Very much depends how your time in prison is handled and obviously how you're perceived in prison. Because there might be certain crimes which there might be a group of people that perceive you as a hero for committing that crime potentially. So it very much is how you'd be perceived in prison, how you're going to get on and how bad the crime is. If you're talking specifics, you want me to name something? I think someone like an Axel Rudakabana, someone like that, I'd very, very happily see the death penalty brought back for.
Yeah, I think someone like that is absolutely fine and absolutely fair with the assertion. I also think with the crimes and level that Ian Watkins did over a period of time, absolutely you can understand that. I think anything in relation to any children or anything like that, I think it would. And I think there's going to be a growing sentiment of people that do want the death penalty to come back. And I'd love to know what you think in the comments as well. Like, do people like this deserve the death penalty? And what is your sentiment watching these videos? And when we've told the story of Ian Huntley in the previous video, you know all of the gory details. What do you actually think? I'm very interested to know. Let me bring it back very quickly to Damien Folkes. He was actually given a life sentence after this attempted murder, but also he was given a manslaughter charge for another child killer called Colin Hatch. Do you know anything about Colin Hatch?
Yeah, Colin Hatch was in prison for the murder of Sean Williams in 1994.
So yeah, neither of those people are going to be incredibly missed, I would say, in terms of Damien Folkes' victims. Damien Folkes actually spoke about this after the fact, and he was asked, do you actually regret your actions? And he said, no. He said, I wish I'd killed him. And it wasn't long after that until the final attack on Ian Huntley.
Being that we're talking about prison attacks, it's probably not right I let you move on without telling you, do you know what has happened to Damien Folkes?
No.
Damien Folkes had his throat slit himself by another inmate called Liam McCarthy. And this wasn't even an attack that we knew about, really. It does show you, in my opinion, how rife these prison attacks are.
And before we get into the final attack, Huntley, after this one, was actually growing a bit of confidence. He was walking out the prison, swanning around, doing his usual bollocks. And why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is something that came out in the media. I personally thought that it was maybe a very far-fetched story to be able to sell newspapers, but actually it's something that a lot of people have doubled down on, said definitely happened, and it's a moment that I believe could even have been the trigger for what we saw happen to Ian Huntley eventually. Now, I mentioned the fact that I felt Ian Huntley had a weasel-like persona, and that was for good reason. That's because reports state that Ian Huntley actually grew a lot in confidence after his attacks, and this was because of the fact that he was then classed as a vulnerable prisoner, and at any one time he may have had 2 or 3 guards around him, and therefore when he felt he had that protection in numbers, he would apparently walk around with his head held high. He would smirk at other prisoners and laugh while he walked away if any of them said anything to him. But in 2025, Ian Huntley reportedly did something that infuriated both prison guards and inmates. He reportedly used his canteen money to buy a plain red sports top with the number 10 on the back from Sports Direct. When he got it, he then put it on and walked around the prison in a red football shirt that mirrored what his victims were wearing that day. Reports at the time claimed that this was a Man United shirt, but apparently it wasn't. However, everyone inside that prison knew the sentiment that Huntley was going for. He put the shirt on, he strutted out of his cell onto the wing, and he walked round in that red top. The inmates and the guards were said to have not been able to believe what they had just seen, and in that moment there, Ian Huntley definitely sealed his fate. And they raid his cell, they take that football top, and they take all of his luxuries. But they also find some more items in there, including a memory stick and a framed photo of Maxine Carr, the woman who helped him commit his crimes. And obviously, as a result of this, his privileges were stripped and his protection was lessened. Ian Huntley was now a way more gettable target.
Yeah, so after this transgression, Huntley is a more wanted man than he ever has been. And on the 26th of February, 2026, Huntley is in HMP Frankland, and at around 9 a.m. he was working in a waste management area. And as Huntley bent down to tie up a bit of string around some of the waste, he was then attacked from behind in a very violent way. He was hit in the head with a metal pole over 15 times. And as this was all going on, other inmates were actually cheering the attacker on. But the question is, who was this attacker?
Yeah, so Anthony Russell is a triple murderer who went on a 9-day killing spree in Coventry, which started with his best friend. So Anthony Russell and a friend of his, David Williams, were inside his flat and had allegedly taken substances one day when Anthony started to become paranoid. He got it into his head that David Williams was sleeping with his girlfriend, even though this was not the case. But before David could act, Anthony Russell strangled his friend, and after he was incapacitated, he inflicted 87 separate injuries on him. He then hides David's body underneath his bed for 5 whole days, and he goes to console David's mother and promise her he's going to help her look for David. But at some point, he decides to admit to his crime. And upon doing so and realizing that David's mother, Julie, could simply go and tell the police, he kills her. And after brutally murdering both her mother and her son, Anthony Russell now has time on his hands. He heads into the town centre and he befriends a couple who he convinces to help him look for substances. Nicole McGregor and Christopher White are actually expecting a baby together. Nicole's pregnant, and she shows Anthony Russell that baby scan once it's just those two. Her partner Christopher had gone off on his own, and her and Anthony stayed looking together. Anthony managed to lure her into some woods, and he both and killed Nicole McGregor. And when people think that Nicole's gone missing, Anthony finds her partner Christopher. He tells Christopher that Nicole told him about the pregnancy, and he says, "You must be made up." Anyway, a 5-day manhunt follows. Anthony Russell is found sleeping inside of his car, and he's sent to prison. So I understand that Anthony Russell may have done something that made you guys happy, but to claim this man deserves a medal is so far from the truth.
And this attack left Huntley completely blind. lines, and he was also placed into a vegetative state. So at the scene, he was stabilized and then he was transported to a hospital via an air ambulance, and that hospital was in Newcastle. There he was placed into a medically induced coma, and so bad was his injuries and the bruising as a result of that, that when his own mother went to visit him in hospital, she said that he was completely unrecognisable. And what was clear for medical staff was that his condition wasn't going to improve, and so they withdrew life support on the morning of the 7th of March 2026, and he passed soon after that.
And Huntley's death was met by both relief and celebration. One person said that his ashes should be thrown down the toilet. Do you know who said that?
No, I don't.
Those were the words of Samantha Bryan, Ian Huntley's biological daughter. Samantha was a young girl from Grimsby who knew that she had a father, but her mother had always warned her that her dad was a bad man. And although he was her biological father, he would never be involved in her life. But one day when Samantha's in high school, she's tasked with producing a report on the local area. And when looking online, she sees a picture of her own mother stood with Ian Huntley. She confronts her mum about it, and her mum explains to her that yes, her biological father was Ian Huntley. He had actually, in my opinion, took advantage of Samantha's mother years and years ago, and he started dating her when she was just 15 years old. And by the time she was of legal age, Ian Huntley impregnated Samantha's mother. And luckily, Samantha's mother, Katie, was able to escape from Ian Huntley. But 14 or 15 years later, she would be having to explain exactly what had happened to her daughter. And she did write to Ian Huntley a couple of times, but she ceased communication after she felt that she wasn't getting anywhere in terms of getting him to confess to his crime. And another person who hasn't said anything in the wake of Ian Huntley's death is Maxine Carr, the woman who, if things had have gone to plan, would have helped Ian Huntley get away with the double murder. She obviously didn't get as harsh a sentence as Ian Huntley, but there's a lot of people, including myself, that feel that everyone went a bit too easy on Maxine Carr. Even in adaptations, when you've seen the story played out with actors on the TV, there's always an implication that Maxine Carr was just a bit of an airhead, and she didn't really know much, and she never really questioned why she was cleaning that house thoroughly after being away for the weekend and lying about her whereabouts. But the woman who served just 21 months in custody for her crimes now has a lovely new life. She's got a partner, a husband, in fact, that does apparently know of her crimes. But someone who doesn't apparently know of these crimes is her 16-year-old son, who legally she may be required to tell soon. So Huntley may be dead, but Maxine Carr is able to have a life where I'm sure there are days where she's able to forget about what happened in Soham all those years ago. But there are two sets of families who will never forget what happened, and they will never forget those two beautiful girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman.
Yes, so we've now covered this story in two separate videos, and it's been hard each time that we've covered it. Obviously, we're now incredibly happy that Ian Huntley has passed away, and ultimately we hope that there is some justice for the families of those victims in which he harmed. And we just want to say a huge thank you to every single one of you that is sticking with us and watching our videos on Joey and Josh. The amount of support and the amount of wonderful comments that we've had in each of our videos recently has been absolutely amazing, and it is all down to you guys. So thank you so much. If you aren't yet a subscriber, this would be a wonderful time to hit that subscribe button. And if you do also see a button below that says hype or even like, we would massively appreciate it if you could hit those as well. It just helps share the video to a few new people. And before we go, we cannot say thank you enough to our channel members. Those are the wonderful people that get our videos up to 48 hours before anyone else. Every single video they get early. And thank you to all of our members that keep supporting us. It allows us to make these wonderful videos for you guys. And if you do want to watch another video after this, we strongly recommend the first Huntley video that we covered. There'll also be a video below that of something that YouTube recommends. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.